Helen Keller, Crusader for the Blind and Deaf, by Stuart and Polly Ann Graff. Chapter 1. Darkness. One afternoon, a little girl sat on the porch on her home. It was her sixth birthday, June 27, in the year 1886. The house was in a small town of Tuscumbia, Alabama. The little girl had girly golden hair. Her bare arms and legs were sturdy, but there was something different about her eyes. When she stared into the bright sun, she did not blink. Roses bloomed in the arbor. Across the yard, a pony whined in the pasture. It would have been a nice afternoon to ride, but the little girl sat alone. There was an angry expression on her face. She could feel the warm sun, but she could not see anything but blackness, because she was blind. She could smell the roses, but could not see the color. She could not hear the pony whine because she was deaf also. The little girl's name was Helen Keller. She lived with her parents and her baby sister Mildred in a comfortable house with wide fields and a big barn. Helen's father had been a captain in the Civil War. Now he owned a newspaper. When Helen Keller was born, she could see and hear like other children. But when she was a year and a half, she became very ill. Fever burned her small body. The doctors could not help. Her mother and father were afraid Helen would die. At last Helen got better, but the fever left a terrible mark. When her mother brought a lamp, Helen did not look at the bright light. When her father clapped his hands loudly, she did not turn toward the sound. Then they knew that their little girl was blind and deaf. Helen was soon well and strong again. When she grew older, she wanted to play and run, but when she ran, she crashed into trees and fences or fell and hurt herself. Other children were afraid to play with her because she often hit them roughly and broke their toys. Even Belle, the family setter dog, ran away from her. Helen did not understand that anyone had feelings except her. Once she pushed her baby sister out of her cradle. Worst of all, Helen could not speak or understand others. Her mind was bright and active. She could feel her way quickly through the house or follow a path to the barn. She learned a few signs. She would pull or push to mean come or go. She could show her mother that she was hungry or thirsty. But Helen could not hear voices. She could not see people talking. She did not know people talked in words. Sitting on the porch steps, Helen was restless and lonely. She did not know it was her birthday. She did not know that her mother was in the house baking her a cake. Suddenly, the screen door slammed. Helen turned. She could not hear the slam, but it made a shake. It was a vibration that she could feel. She felt the tap tap of her mother's footsteps. Mrs. Keller had come to dress Helen for supper, but when Helen sniffed the smell of freshly baked cake, she ran past her mother. She felt her way quickly to the kitchen and grabbed at the cake. She stuffed warm chunks in her mouth. Mrs. Keller hurried after Helen. She took away the cake and put it out of reach. Helen was angry. She loved sweets, and she was used to eating anything she wanted. She did not know the cake was for her birthday supper. She kicked and screamed. She fell on the floor sobbing. Before her mother could stop her, Helen rushed outdoors. She ran wildly into a bramble bush. The thorns scraped her face. She tripped and fell. A sharp stone cut her knee. Mrs. Keller carried Helen back inside. She bandaged Helen's knee and put her to bed. The birthday cake was spoiled. Helen was worn out with temper and crying. She was alone in the darkness again. Downstairs, Helen's mother and father ate their supper sadly. Mrs. Keller told her husband what had just happened. Helen's tempers are getting worse, Mrs. Keller said, but we cannot punish her when she does not understand. Captain Keller shook his head. If only we could find someone to help her.